I'm Maz, and I'm going to be talking about doing an aspect of cosplay today. So I've been cosplaying for many years now, probably about 7 or 8 years, but one of the things that I don't have as much experience with is wig work, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. So the costume that I'm currently doing is a character called Xiaomu from a video game called NamcoXCapcom. And she has quite an exceptional hairstyle, as you can see in the picture. She has 5 tails on her head. She's a fox spirit, so that's why she's got the colourings at the bottom of each of the tails, and also on her bangs at the side as well. So essentially, it's not the easiest of styles to create with just a wig that you've bought off the internet. So it requires a certain amount of structural work in order to be able to get that kind of effect, and that's what I'm going to be doing today. I have already made a start on the wig. You can see it just to the left hand side here. Okay, this is the Xiaomu wig. So as you can see, there are 5 hair tails on there in total. So the way in which I've made the underlying structure for this is I've used aluminium wire and I've plaited it to make it more sturdy. Even having plaited it, it still sagged under the weight of the weft when I put it on originally, so I had to reinforce the bottom parts of it with steel wire. So that's what's essentially at the core of each of these tails, is a plaited piece of aluminium wire with some steel wire running in between it to give it extra tensile strength so that it stays up properly. So having made the wire frame, after that I then put white batting around each of the wire lengths. So I basically wrapped it round and hand sewed it in place. Having done that, I then put a layer of yellow felt over the top of that, and that's what you can see in the picture here. So these, I can just bend them and put them in any shape, as you can see there. So by putting the felt over the top, it gives something for the glue to adhere to when you're putting the wefts on, and also because it's yellow, if there's any gaps in the weft it won't be quite so obvious, so that's why I've done that. I'm now going to lift the top part of the wig up so that you can see the wire structure that's underneath, because essentially I had to make the wire structure first and then thread it through the bottom of the wig so that it was coming out this end. So at the moment I've got the wig anchored to the wig head using bobby pins. It's very back heavy, so as soon as I take the bobby pins out it'll start to fall backwards, but if I peel back the top you'll be able to see. And there we go, so you should be able to see all of the wire structures there. There we go, so you can see the wires sticking out at the top there, and basically each one of those wires is all looped together in a big mess, essentially, underneath the wig. I'm going to be putting some batting over the top of that to make it more comfortable against my head, because having exposed wires next to my head is not particularly comfortable, and in order to make the wig less likely to fall off, I'm also planning on sewing some wig clips into this top part here as well, but that'll come later and I'll probably do a separate video tutorial for that. So that's what's underneath, and essentially all of that wire structure is what's giving the wig its stability and letting it keep all the tails nice and upright. Moving on to the weft that I've already completed, I've wrapped it in cling film. The reason I've done that is to keep it nice, essentially. It's covered in hairspray, PVA glue, goodness knows what else. Having spent ages doing it, I didn't want it to then get messed up in the intervening time period between me working on it next. So by wrapping it in cling film down the entire length of it, it makes it a lot easier to be able to keep it looking nice. So I'm now going to talk about how I put this weft on. So if I just lift the cling film up a little bit. So this weft has been essentially hand sewn onto the yellow batting. So if I zoom in a little bit, you should be able to see a line of stitching there. So you can see there's a bit of yellow cotton here. I've just left that free so that if I need it again I can reuse it. But basically it just took a lot of pushing in and out with the hand needle to just sew that weft onto the batting. It looks pretty messy, it's fine, it's getting covered up by red ribbon, so it really doesn't matter. Moving the cling film back a little bit more, you can see where I've been gluing the weft on. So the underside of the weft I secured using PVA glue. I wanted the wig to look fairly natural. As a result of that, I tried to avoid using PVA glue on the upper layers of the wig. I did that because I wanted it to have the bulk and the structure without looking like they'd just been caulked into place, in which case they would look a little bit shiny and it wasn't really the effect that I wanted. So essentially I've done this in two stages. The first stage was to layer PVA glue onto the yellow felt and then gently press the weft against it, working in stages across the entire wig and then drying it out with a hairdryer. And then the second stage was to tidy up all of the loose hairs, etc., using hairspray. So that's essentially what I did for this, and I did it for the entire length of the wig. Okay, so this is a weft in its packet. This is what's gone on to that first tail of Xiaomu's wig, and it looks really nice and pristine in the packet, doesn't it? When you're working with wefts, one of the first things that happens with them when you take them out of the packet is that they start to tangle, unfortunately. A wig weft will never look as nice once it's out of the packet as it does inside it. Sad but true, but there are some things that you can do to minimise the amount of tangling that can occur when you're extracting it out of the bag and when you're working with it. So I'm going to be talking about that just now. So this is pretty much how something arrives from when you order from CosCraft or probably a whole bunch of other places. So I'm just going to open this up. So the weft essentially comes in a long plastic bag. So you've got to open that up first. And there we go. Okay, so you can see it a lot better now that it's not wrapped around in about 20 layers of plastic. So at this end, it's secured with cable ties. Okay, when you're trying to get these off, you just need to cut them off, because if you try and actually untangle them, they just get tangled up in the wig hairs and it's just not worth it. So just cut them with a pair of scissors and just take them out. So the bottom's open at this end. When you're taking it out, what you want to do is you want to grab the centre, and then you want to get your whole hand inside the bag and just pull it out like so. Okay, so I've pulled it out of the bag by grabbing it in the centre. By doing it, by holding it in the centre, it means that you're tangling it less because you've got a hold of the main body of hairs. So not all of the hairs in this weft are the same length. As you can see, it's thinner at the bottom than it is at the top. So if you grabbed it by the bottom, you wouldn't have grabbed all of the hairs. So as you can see, it's already starting to get a few flyaway stray hairs just from having taken it out of the bag. But hey ho, that's how it works. So when you're holding it, as much as possible, try and hold it in two places, because it stops it from just going everywhere, basically. So I'm going to just put that down for now. This is cutting the gold cable ties off using a pair of scissors. So I've just cut those at the top, and I'm just going to really carefully pull that out from this side. As you can see, it's gone ever so slightly tangled up in the wig hair. That's to be expected. Don't pull on it at this point, just cut it free. The most common way of tangling up a wig is to just start pulling on random hairs of it. So there's a lot of hair in this weft. I'm not going to cry over losing a few strands of it in the name of not having the rest of it tangle like a mofo. And that's all of that gone. Okay, so I now have a bunch of folded wefts. So this is actually one really long weft that has been folded over many times. So when you are trying to unfold the length of this, firstly you ask yourself, do I actually need to unfold this at all? Do I even need to cut off these cable ties? If you're just wanting an extra plait on a wig, then you can most likely get away with just leaving all of this stuff together and just plaiting the entire length of it. But in my case, I actually only need half of what's here. So for one tail on Xiaomu's wig, I need half of this weft to cover the length of it. I tried using an entire weft. Unfortunately, it made it too heavy and it started to sag. And as it turned out, I didn't actually need the full length of the weft to get good coverage anyway. These wefts are £5 each. So Xiaomu has 5 hair tails. If I'd used one weft for each hair tail, it would have cost me £25 just for that part of the wig, never mind the base wig itself. So if you've got cost to consider, there's a lot of hair in a weft, so you might not necessarily need all of it. So if you're going to do what I'm about to do, which is spread the entire weft out and cut it in half, then you do need to be careful when you're doing this because it will tangle like anything. So you need to have an appropriate wig brush, which I have. I'll show you what happens if you don't do all of that. This is another weft that I used. I put the entire lot on and PVA glued it. It didn't work, so I took it back off again, but as you can see, it is horribly, horribly tangled. Even after I've spent ages brushing it out, I can't really use this. So it's just there for demonstration really, to show how bad it can get. What a mess this looks, but it's okay. This is me halfway through unfolding the weft. So to give you an idea of how long it is already when I've barely even started, there we go. So as you can see, all of the hair has started to tangle together as I've unfolded it. This is completely to be expected when you're working with a weft, and it can be brushed out really easily. So for now, I'm not going to do anything with this. I'm going to just take the entire length out and then I will brush it clear. And ta-da! This is the entire weft. It's still double folded, but that's okay because I just need to cut it at the fold and then I'll have 2 separate lengths of weft. So this took a little while of brushing to get it all to spread out nicely, but it's done now. So all I need to do now is take the top layer of weft and what I want to do is then fold it back into its original state. By doing that, I can then hang it up and start to plait it. So what I've done here is I've folded the wefts back up again. So this is one weft that was now been cut in half and folded into 2 wefts. So this is just a bog standard trouser hanger, and what I've done is I've just attached each individual weft to each end. So if I lift it up, you can see it's all tangled, and the reason for that was because the wefts that I laid out were double folded. I then cut one end, but in the process of lifting it off the other one, it tangles. But that's okay because that's easily brushed out. Because I've been trying to keep contact with the weft with my hands to a minimum, it's not actually that tangled and is brushable. So this is the weft all hung up and ready for brushing. So I'm now going to brush it out using this. This is a Denman dress out brush, courtesy of Coscroft. This whole video is a giant Coscroft advert, but never mind. So when you're brushing a weft, or any wig really, you always want to start from the bottom. So all of these wig fibres are only very loosely wrapped around each other, and therefore it shouldn't take too much brushing to actually get it looking nice. So I'm using the brush vertically initially. That's because a lot of these wefts are just ever so slightly, weft fibres are just ever so slightly joined together. So by using the brush vertically, I can tease out the majority of these fibres. So you see how I haven't gone anywhere above the bottom part of the weft? And you see it's already looking tons better. Okay, so it's just a couple separating them in the middle. I'm just going to bring my hand down gently. Down the centre. So it's just this problem bit in the centre now that's the issue. So I'm just gently wafting the brush at it. So you don't have to pull hard. They should just come away fairly easily. And that's it done. So it's tempting to just start brushing the wefts now. Don't do it. They're fine the way they are, and I'm just going to plait them now. So because I've got them hung up nicely, it makes it a lot easier for me to plait them as well. there we go, that's the finished product. So that's the two wefts all plaited and ready to go. You can see one's ever so slightly longer than the other. That's pretty fine, it doesn't really matter all too much. Generally, wefts are far longer than what you ever actually need them for, so if their lengths are a little bit uneven, it's not the end of the world. I'll also show you the Denman brush after I finished with it. As you can see, there's quite a bit of wig hair on it. Again, that's to be expected. There's a lot of hair. You're going to lose some of it. It's not the end of the world. The wig hair itself is actually sewn onto the weft. It's basically overlocked at the top. So when you cut a weft in half, this is just kind of a little extra tip, that stitching can sometimes unravel depending on what kind of weft it is or what kind of wig you've bought. So if you're ever cutting things up and you want it to be absolutely certain, you can just daub a little bit of super glue onto the end of it to keep that stitching in place and just hold it until it dries, and then that will secure it. So yeah, that's everything for that. So I've now got 4 plaited wefts which I'm going to be using on Xiaomu's tails later. I've now pinned the weft in place, so you can see some of the pins there. The other thing that I did prior to pinning this was that I used a bunch of bog standard supermarket twist ties, you know, the ones that you get when you buy plastic bags. I used those. They're very similar to the ones that were already on the wig that I snipped off, but having separated it out, cut it in half, I now wanted to fold it back together again to make a nice thick layer of hair. So to do that, I just basically used the cable ties to keep all of this top line of stitching here, to keep all of that together in the folded layers of the weft before pinning it on. I now need to hand sew it, which is going to be incredibly tedious. I will probably be using a curved needle to do that, because I'm having to work in between this tail and that tail, and also work underneath where I can't see very well, so having a curved needle will just make things a little bit easier for me. This is the weft ready to start gluing. So what I've done is I've divided this into 4 different parts. So this is the bit that's being glued across the top there, like so. That's the left side, that's the right side, and then underneath here I've got a bunch of hair that's going to make the underside of the weft. So I've prepared the area because I'm going to be using PVA glue. It's completely undiluted as well, so it's going to be very gloopy, very messy. What I've done is I've actually cut open the bag that the weft came in, and I've laid it over this chair to catch the worst of the PVA drips. Okay, here we go. Gloopy gloopy PVA. Dab it onto the batting, like so. I'm just doing the top and sides initially. Just a little bit at a time. If you do too much, then it won't all stay. It needs to be quite thick in order to be able to catch a decent amount of the hair and to get in between them a little bit as well. I'm using a completely dead brush, by the way. This is already stiff with many layers of PVA. Easy does it. I'm pulling these bits nice and taut, flipping that over the top so it doesn't get caught. And you just press it down gently. You don't want to push it too hard because otherwise you get PVA coming through at the top. This is the side bit coming on now. And the other bit. Okay, so I've got the whole length of it there. Now we get the hairdryer. Okay, so that's the first part of it done. So I turn the hairdryer up to quite a high heat towards the end there. If you use too high heat, it can potentially damage your wig fibres, so you do need to be careful with it. But in addition to that, the higher heat also helps to set it in place. So that's why I used it on that particular part of it. I've tied a bit of cord around the weft that I've glued down so far. I've done that because these parts are still separate, and because of the curve of the weft, the curve of the hairtail rather, there is a tendency for this to fall away. So by tying this here, I can keep in place all the bits that I've glued up until now, while still allowing me to freely manipulate the bits that I haven't glued down yet. Also, I don't need to worry about the weight of this pulling away what I've already glued. So I've put most of the top layer of the weft on now. You can see there's lots of ribbons tied at intervals along here. This curve point here, this is the part that is the most difficult bit to do, because the weight of the weft tends to fall to the bottom. So you can see there's quite a few gaps here that I'm going to need to fix up. Those will all be fine. I can fix those up pretty easily with some hairspray once I've finished. The main thing is to actually get the bulk of the hair glued on, and then I can tidy it up afterwards. So having done the majority of the top part of this now, I'm now moving on to attaching the underside of the layer of hair. So I'll just angle this underneath. So you can see underneath here I've started gluing it, and that's where the bit that I've got to do next. And ta-da! This is the weft all finished. So overall I'm fairly happy with this one. If you have a look at the top part, it's like nice and smooth, goes all the way down. I have trouble with the curves. It's just because, as you can see on the battered ones that I haven't actually put wefts on, there's a lot of rumples here. It's just because it's a tube and it's been bent, is to be expected. But as a result of that, it means that in some places on the curve, the wig hair doesn't lie completely flat, and I'll show you this just here. So there we go. I've tried to fix that up as best I can with PVA, but you can see that there's kind of a channel in here where the wig hair lies closer to the batting than the rest of it does. So once this is all dry, what I'm going to have to do is take a little bit of hair off another weft and just kind of stick it in there to fill that channel up a bit better. So that's 2 down and 3 to go. I hope this tutorial's been useful, and goodbye.